So, Zachary,
Amie.
Avery,
Amie.
you guys heard about Canada?
I've never heard of her.
Oh, Canada. Familiar with her work.
Canada has been ruled by or elected,
The
liberal.
Duchy of Canada.
There's sort of still a, province of Britain or whatever, but we won't get into that. Anyway.
A commonwealth isn't a province, dog. What are you saying?
Okay.
You're already interrupting, Zach.
Let me have my take, then destroy it. Okay. So to recap, the Canadians have been electing the Liberal Party for like 10 years or something. The Liberal Party being basically the Democrats. And so it was very likely that they were going to elect Conservatives, basically the Republicans, this year. And in fact, Conservatives had been polling really, really well up until Trump came along and called their former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a governor, and Canada the 51st state. And that plus tariffs basically flipped the polls so that actually Canada's Liberal Party pulled out a win that they were not expected to at all win. They were definitely expected to like lose seats in this election.
I'm glad we're helping somebody.
I love the idea that we always say that the problem that Democrats have right now is that people want to vote for something, they don't want to vote against something, but Canadians are like, nah, we just don't like that guy, so that's apparently voting against something is pretty effective.
But also you have to look at how special elections have been going recently, and they've definitely been going in the Democrats' favor in this country. Like we just had last week Angel Ramirez in District 78 that Sammy Sheets resigned to become a county supervisor from, win her district. Now, this was a safe seat. Angel was expected to win, but she won it by 28 points higher than Kamala Harris won it in November.
Wow.
Which is the biggest discrepancy that the Democrats have seen since Trump's been elected.
Dang. And what was Mike Zimmer's was like, his was like a 21 point difference from like when like Trump won that district, right?
And again, Trump won that
district.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's
also
huge.
crazy. Yeah.
It's important to note that the folks that vote in these elections aren't necessarily representative of the kind of electorate, the general election electorate, but it is 100% a sign of pretty motivated activist class who's willing to put money towards time spent knocking doors, doing mailers to win an election. And it would have been, I mean, if you think about special elections as a kind of a lowercase d democratic kind of mobilization drive, right? It's like a way of like getting people interacting with the electoral process. Maybe it's motivating. Like maybe having some special elections is a good way of gassing up the base to be prepared for a midterm that's projected to favor Democrats at the moment.
I wonder if there's a way to compare like those differentials. Like you said that Angel Ramirez won the district by like 28 more points than Kamala Harris won the district by. I wonder if there's a way to kind of compare those, because I know like you said, Zach, special elections are like not super typically historically representative of like larger voter bases, but I wonder if like maybe looking at those differentials would show us some more information about the special elections.
Because you're not just pulling in the people that normally come to special elections. You are also pulling in a whole bunch of people that don't. Plus, you might be pulling in independents, that's what you're saying, and maybe a few Republicans that are like,
This is all really thoughtful discussion of special election dynamics, and the cold open is reserved for poopy humor, and I'm a little. This is why, Amie. This is why you got to leave the bad takes to me, my guy.
Because I don't have bad takes. That's what you're saying. You're right. You're right. I don't have bad takes.
And there's no place here for good takes. Welcome to Cornhole Champions, a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line, where we throw bags at the state's biggest stories. I'm Zachary Oren Smith. It's Wednesday, and I'm joined today by Iowa Starting Line's Amie Rivers and Avery Staker. This week, we're doing something a little different. Amie and I are out the next 2 weeks on some PTO, but we didn't want to hang it up for half a month. This week, we're getting to the heart of why we're doing this show. And more importantly, we're still doing this work. We'll be exploring what drives us as journalists, the stories that have shaped our careers, and why we believe local reporting matters now more than ever. From navigating the challenging media landscape to finding meaning in the communities we cover, today the stories behind the storytellers. That's coming up on Cornhole Champions. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm joined today by Iowa Starting Line's maven of the written word, Iowa Starting Line newsletter editor, Amie Rivers. Hello, Amie.
Newsletter. Yes, I like it a lot.
And coming in hot from the infinite scroll, Starting Line's social strategist, Avery Staker. Hello, Avery.
Hello.
To kick off the summer, we wanted to take an episode to introduce ourselves. We have on this show 3 generations of Iowa journalism, and I think that makes the crosstalk pretty special. We're recording this 1 week before it comes out, so I thought it'd be a good time to talk about what motivates the show and why we do the work that we do. I'm Zachary Oren Smith, a Iowa journalist since I moved here in 2017. I've worked for the Muscatine Journal, the Iowa City Press Citizen, for Iowa Public Radio, and now Iowa Starting Line. I cover politics for the website, for Instagram. I mostly talk to my phone inside the Iowa Capitol for a living. Amie, tell me about you.
Do we really have 3 generations? Because you're a millennial, right?
Right, and you're old, right?
I'm a millennial. I am definitely a millennial.
Sounds
I am
like
not
a
Gen
boomer to
X.
me.
So
Oh, X. I just sorry. Everything north of millennial.
everyone forgets Gen X. Yeah, it's a sad thing. Sorry, Gen X. We love you. I started out in journalism in 2006. So I've been at the Fergus Falls Daily Journal in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. I've been at the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier in Waterloo. I've been at KWWL TV in Waterloo. Then I went back to the Courier, and then Iowa Starting Line poached me. And I've been here since March of 2022.
And we do poach.
We definitely poached you.
It's a headhunting operation round
Sorry,
here.
IPR.
Sorry. Avery, tell us about you.
Yeah, well, like Zach said, my name is Avery. I use any pronouns. I identify as trans non-binary. Get that right. Starting Line's my first job. It was my first job straight out of college. I graduated in 2023 from Iowa State. And I started on kind of a journalism track, but I went more towards PR because I needed money for my internship. I needed to pay for things.
Yeah.
But I got into doing kind of really local, really small, kind of targeted, small audience focused type PR work with a small business in Ames, and that's kind of what drew me to Iowa Starting Line. Then my main job is making memes and telling Amie and Zach when their videos look bad. And
it's a very important job.
Yeah.
And I'm usually like, what do you mean? It's fine.
Like I mentioned earlier, blocking boomer burner accounts from saying hateful things underneath our posts. Yeah.
Censor-in-chief Avery Staker.
Yeah.
I think I'm in year 10 about thereabouts in terms of jobs in news. And I was talking to someone about this earlier about what is the thing that keeps you here? Is there for you guys a kind of local story, something that stays with you for your reporting?
When I was at the Courier in 2008, I wrote a story about this actually happened because the Parkersburg tornado, the huge EF5 tornado, came through. And then we were doing a lot of stories around that. And one of the things that came out of it was it's really devastating when you have a giant tornado like that because it can wipe out everything. But smaller tornadoes are more common, and they can wipe out an entire mobile home community like that and leave a conventionally constructed home untouched.
Yeah.
And that was really scary to me. And I was like, well, I hope these people have somewhere to go. And I looked into it, and they really don't. And there were no laws around having a tornado shelter in your mobile home community. So these people are sort of sitting ducks, essentially. If something happens, they have to leave. They have to get in their car if the tornado siren blows and go somewhere that's safe because they can't be in their own house. And even a small tornado could injure or kill them and destroy their home. So that was really something that I started I found that sort of advocacy journalism really important. I ended up winning an investigative award for it in 2008 because, well, not because of anything, just it happened. So then what that taught me was hey, it's this sort of work is like important. I like really felt really proud of that because out of that came at least discussions in the legislature. I'm not actually sure if they ever passed anything that mandated it. But out of that also came like other mobile home parks starting to be like, hey, we're gonna have a shelter, or like starting to use that as advertising for folks to come on board. And like these are still like very under-resourced communities, and it's still a big problem, but that was definitely one that I was like, "Oh, I sort of like the advocacy journalism side of things. I like the solution journalism side of things because that's actually moving the needle."
Yeah, Avery.
Right. Well, I guess for me it's a little bit different because I don't do kind of stories in the most traditional sense. But as far as coverage, there's two that really stick out to me. Oh, okay. Oh, that's my cat. There's two that really stick out to me. One of them is this was last summer. It was when the Orient Maxburg School District was going through its like closure process. And at the time, our political editor was Ty Rushing, and me and him traveled down to Orient a few times to like the school board meetings that they had about that. And I just, took videos. Ty was the one that wrote the stories. And I think the reason that was so impactful to me is like, I grew up here. Like I was born and raised in Iowa, and I was born and raised in like a rural area, like an area where the school district is quite small. And it, like I being in that room with all those people, it was like being in a room with people that like I went to school with. Like I felt like I was in a space that was like a home to me. And I really empathized with the people of the Orient Maxburg School District in that way. And then, eventually when the school actually announced its closure, it was really impactful and really upsetting to me because I thought about like what would have happened to like my home communities if that would have happened. And what would have happened to me as a student. What would have happened to, I have a lot of like younger cousins. What would have happened to them? What would have happened to my family member? I have a lot of teachers in my family.
Right.
And so that really stuck with me. And then the other one was, another one from last summer. When the near total abortion ban passed, I made a video about, I disguised it. It was like a, how to garden in Iowa now that gardening is illegal.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And it was basically here's how you can still seek out the healthcare that you need when this is in place. And not even just like how to get an abortion, but like how to seek out proper reproductive healthcare if you are in need of it, now that this is kind of a looming threat. And there was somebody who had DM'd our TikTok after I posted that video and said, because of that video, I was able to seek out the healthcare that I needed. But they said, like, because of your gardening Dan video, I was able to find a way to safely garden. So thank you for posting that.
Yeah.
And I opened that and I read it and I set my phone down and I cried for like 10 minutes because it was so, when that ban passed, like I kind of like what you said, Amie, about advocacy journalism. It was just like one of those moments where it showed how important it is to like share information in a way that it reaches people.
I loved what you were saying about that kind of like intimate relationship that you had with the story and then with the kind of reader responding back. When I was kind of a cub reporter, I remember thinking of being a city reporter as being like kind of the dream position, right? Like I remember there were really cool city reporters down south that I followed pretty closely, and I just that was like a thing I always wanted. In 2018, I joined the Press Citizen and got to do that job. And I think of it as like, I still think of that as like some of my best days reporting, because you get to, by virtue of it happening in that place, it is in, it's your shit.
Jurisdiction. Yes.
Yeah. And there's something really exciting, really like tangible about that. You get to know, it's like in my mind, the greatest way you could get to know a town. It's probably why I still live in Iowa City and not Des Moines, right? Or a bigger, like Davenport, a bigger town. Is I just kind of know these streets really closely. And I think it's really informed kind of how I am as a community member, being a journalist in this community. Has the job kind of shaped the way y'all relate to your communities?
Oh yeah, I'm always the friend that you go to get the scoop on the news for sure. So people are always asking, and they still honestly do. And I know a lot less about Waterloo than I used to because I'm not going to city council regularly. I'm not going to the county supervisors board regularly. I'm so out of the loop. So yeah, I do miss that.
My friends have started coming to me for like during the election season. They were like, "Where's our polling location? Like, how do I find that? Like,
Yeah.
who are these?" Like, they were asking me about like different candidates and stuff, and not necessarily in the sense that they thought that I knew everything like straight off the bat, but they knew I knew how to find it. And I think that's been really nice for me, is I'm able to kind of like not be the sole source of information for people around me, but help them become their own sources of information and help them know how to
Teach a
seek
man
out.
to fish.
Yeah. No, help them know how to, seek out right information from the right sources.
Totally.
Yeah, and I really that's like more kind of in my closer circle. But I guess for like the larger community, it's kind of like you said, Zach. It's made me want to get to know my community a little bit better.
Well, I think that's like kind of one of the big misconceptions I see about kind of what it is we do as journalists, what we do as reporters. There's no like power that we have to do what we do that citizen doesn't, right? That another person doesn't. The difference is time. The difference is we're paid to do it, right? And so obviously that affords a lot of attention, that affords a lot of time, right? But like FOIA requests are anyone can do those, right? Anyone can attend these meetings. Anybody can anybody should be able to attend a press conference, even though they elected officials tend to like keep people out unless they're press. And I think it's a misconception, right? That it's like it's separate and it's apart from the work we do as a public, right? The only difference is we have a responsibility to come tell you about it after the fact, right? Are there some other misconceptions that you guys kind of run into from folks in the queer community when they're talking about the job?
I guess not while I'm on the job, but just something that I see from just being like an aware person of the culture and my surroundings is like the goal of journalism isn't necessarily, I guess in my mind, it shouldn't necessarily be like nonpartisanship. I feel like people look to journalism as like the old, like they try to like force journalism into like a purely objective box. And that's just like one, impossible, and two, not super like productive. And I think what I've tried to like get people around me to understand is that it's about capturing perspective.
Yeah,
I think that's the most common misconception that I see, is that it's not necessarily about objectivity, it's about perspective.
and I could go on for hours about objectivity's issues, but I'll just say that, like, as it relates to sort of like covering things in your own hometown, people sort of think there's one truth, maybe boomers and sort of older folks might think this.
Ooh, get 'em.
I've had conversations with my dad about this before. He's like, truth is truth. You got to tell the truth. I'm like, here's the deal about truth. Do I decide to go to an event? First of all, there's a bias. Do I decide to talk to certain people? There's a bias. Do I decide to quote certain people certain ways? There's a bias. Like literally everything I do are decisions that I and my editors are making along the way. And you could argue that all of that is bias. And so basically, when you are trying to talk to a small community, you have to understand that a lot of people have a lot of different ways of looking at things. And so you have to sort of conglomerate all that. And we call that conglomeration objectivity. But in reality, it's not. You're responding to the community that you have. And that's exactly what we try to do. And when it doesn't work, we're going to pivot because we're going to see our readership drop. Right.
I think you and I've kind of argued about this in the past. Because like I actually think objectivity, I know it's fallen out of vogue, I think, for a lot of folks in the industry, but like I actually think it's like a perfectly fine kind of like virtue to put off in the distance, right? But if your North Star is on trying to report things as they are, I think that's actually like I think that's a good idea, right? It's complicated in the specific, right? I think it gets complicated by positionality, right? That I'm coming at this as someone who's not from Iowa, right? That impacts every observation I make. That's true. that informs the kind of truth that I extract from a place, right? For me, it's not objectivity so much as it is fairness, right? I think there is something really important about working to find fairness, and I don't mean that as like a you need to you gave 3 inches of column to this side, and therefore you need to give 3 inches of column to the other side. I think you need to be honest about where power is. You got to be serious about kind of what is at stake for the people you're covering, right?
Exactly.
And I think we'd all agree that it is important to verify. It is important to go in search of facts to tell a story, right? That we can't. I remember during the summer of the George Floyd protests, this is summer 2020. I remember we were at the Press Citizen covering. This is a period where there was a ton of distrust in government.
Right.
And this is a period that I think of a lot. I remember I would come back. I mean, we were like dividing up the week, who would be out that night, following the protesters through the streets, just monitoring kind of what's going on, what people are saying. And I remember coming back from some of those shifts, feeling the most dog tired I've ever felt. It was around this time that I decided I was going to leave my dream position, right? Leave being a city reporter. And during that period, I got really into cooking. It is something that has remained a hobby that I just lean on like no one else. I love to cook, and it's big. Like, do y'all have like skills or hobbies that you use to cope with some of these?
I don't know about
that we can talk about.
I have
illicit drugs aside.
Brings the anxiety down.
I've always been kind of like a solitary individual. I've always been very into being in my own space, using my own brain to do things. And I always kind of expected that like doing difficult things in my job would make me want to, retreat more into that. Like that would be the most healing thing for me. But ultimately I found that like when we covered the Orient Maxburg closing, the first person I called after it was my mom, and we just like talked about it. And the day that the Iowa legislature passed the trans civil rights removal bill, I went to trivia that night with my friends. And I talked to them about it. And I found that like just kind of being with my closest friends, being with my closest people is what really helps. Like, especially on the day of the trans civil rights removal bill. That whole day, like it was me and my friends at the Capitol rallying for our rights. Like I saw so many people that I knew and so many people that I hang out with there that day. And just being there with them made it, a much better experience. Obviously it sucked to see each other all together in that way, but at the end of the day, just kind of being around, no matter what is kind of going on around us, ultimately we have like each other, and that's what's really helped me in those harder times.
That's got to be mine too. I mean, when Iowa was the first state to by court allow gay marriage, allow same-sex marriage, I was working at the Courier, and having to be a gay woman, covering objectively, these candidates and these campaigns that are constantly, saying that you're pedophiles or you're against God, or it'll never be something that anyone accepts, and all that. It's good to have, like you said, Avery, that community around you. It's good to like go to the gay bar afterwards and be like, can you believe these fuckers? Like, and have them be like, I know.
Shout out the Blazing Saddle. Shout out the Blazing Saddle. I love you guys.
Having that community is really important. I think in a lot of things that you go through in life, having that community is important, and in a lot of professions that deal with a lot of like traumatic situations sometimes. I think you really need to have people around you.
That kind of grounding is so important. And without it, I don't think that it's possible to do some of the really hard work that this job requires, right? I think a lot about a recent story. There was an explosion at a facility in Marengo where that injured workers. And it was, for me, a really heavy lift. Involved a lot of document work, a lot of like shoe leather chasing down kind of what happened. there was a tremendous chemical spill. There was like people in the hospital burnt. And what we learned was that the Iowa, through record request after record request, is that Iowa DNR had been asking to bring this group C60 into compliance with regulations, and they had just thwarted it at every possible juncture, had blown off the state. And what ended up happening was people got hurt, right? That there was this that the water table was irreparably damaged. Having that kind of firmament, I think, is really important as you're trying to do that hard work. There's some hard stories, some heavy lifts that you guys had to do while either at this job or previous jobs.
I remember covering the Parkersburg tornado.
Wow.
That was a really tough one. The level of destruction just going into the town reminded me of like the movie Twister, you know. And I just thought of that driving in, and this was like Memorial Day weekend and everything like that when it happened. And when I drove in, it was just like everything was just piles of debris where houses were. The trees were just trunks, maybe a couple branches, nothing else. And just seeing that, and you saw a little bit of that with the derecho down in Cedar Rapids too, coming in, especially the trees aspect of it. And it just sort of hits you in that way, seeing it visually. I remember my stomach just like dropping, you know, and just feeling like, oh gosh, like how do you even talk to people about the scale of this devastation, or
No.
Even something smaller than that. I used to be worried when they'd ask me to like do a feature obituary on somebody. Feature obituary being like you reach out to this person's family and friends and
God,
get a
I
sense of
hated
them.
writing those.
You know what?
I hated writing those so
That
much.
became one of my favorite ones. I'll tell you why.
Really?
Yep. Because
Huh.
every time I would call people, they would always want to talk. That is immediately what people want to do after a death. They want to talk about the person who died. They want to tell you all the good stories about them. These were the easiest people to interview, basically. I wouldn't go to like immediate family members necessarily unless they came to me, but you go outside of that. You go to people who worked with them, people who were friends with them, people who did their hobbies with them. These were beautiful, beautiful stories. And I think that's why I ultimately found them rewarding.
Yeah, totally. Avery, there's a particularly tough one you wanted to talk about.
There's kind of a lot, actually. I mean, I'm still so kind of like young and early in my career that like a lot of stuff still really sticks out. But and I mean, I mentioned this earlier, the trans civil rights bill was really tough because that was like, that was me, you know, like I was there covering something that like directly impacted me. And now I'm having to deal with the ramifications of that, both in my personal and my professional life. Yeah. And it's like, it's hard to escape from that. And I think that was that's the biggest obstacle that I'm still having to face, is like trying to extract all of the different ways that something like this is affecting me and all of the different ways in which I have to pay attention to it.
Well, and to toot your horn a little bit, you were also doing that all by yourself for the most part, right?
I was.
Amie and I were out on a company retreat when they decided
to
push this bill forward, right?
Sorry about that.
And so you were like on the front lines, like someone directly targeted by the verbiage of the bill. Out there doing the work of covering kind of this tremendous rally at the Capitol. It was great coverage that you managed by yourself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was. I guess the personal connection is what made it so good, is because I like the fact that it impacted me so, which is what, like, going back to what we talked about earlier with perspective, like the reason that was so good is because I had that very personal perspective on it. That didn't make it any less true. It made it better, actually. And that was one of those days that I ran around and I got to see all my friends in the same room together for not a great reason, but you know, we were all there together, and that's what made it, I think, I don't want to say easier, but that's what made it worth it to go through all that, is because I was able to do it in a way that truly really mattered, but I don't really think anybody else was able to do that, both in a sense of it directly impacted me in a very, very personal way, and the fact that I had the freedom to honor that perspective with Iowa Starting Line. I don't think any other news outlet would have allowed me to do that.
And I think it's kind of evidence of maybe a change in the way that we get our news, right? The way that the kinds of outlets that exist in the state, right? When I got here, Iowa Starting Line wasn't doing the same work that we're doing today, right? It was a much smaller operation. I think it's super interesting when you look at our coverage versus X TV station or Y newspaper. Because like I find it where I get news, right? I find it in my Instagram feed. I find it in a way that like I don't get see other outlets taking very seriously, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I think my reception of it, right, has been that folks are paying attention, right? That folks are actually it's been really validating the choice to come over here from Iowa Public Radio, because like folks that never didn't know that I was a reporter in town, right? Come up to me like they'll like I saw you. I was scrolling TikTok with my wife last night, and I saw your video on X. I saw you. But I worry about like kind of that changing landscape and like kind of the extent to which we're serving that audience, right? If other, while we're doing the best we can to cover as many stories as we can, but I do feel like there's a absence of Iowa news, of Iowa stories on these apps. And it informs a lot of the work I do. Is there, I don't know, has that like kind of change, has the kind of changing, shifting landscape informed kind of y'all's, this kind of stories you go after, the kind of way you approach the work?
Now, if you're talking about like the newsrooms being decimated, basically, like, oh yeah, for sure, that's definitely because I mean, sometimes I'm the only one at these like Waterloo or Cedar Falls protests nowadays. Sometimes I'm the only one covering these events where there used to be, 3 TV stations and the newspaper. Maybe there'll be 1 TV station, maybe it'll just be me. It's very interesting. I mean, when I started at the Courier, and this was right before 2008 happened and newspapers got taken over by private equity and decimated, there were like 24 people in the newsroom, just covering news, reporters, photographer. There was a 4-person photography team. There were multiple editors for different departments. I was only covering like special sections when I started, and then I was just doing live music. Can you imagine?
Oh,
at the
man.
Cedar Falls Square, right?
That'd be incredible.
And by the time I left, I was not only covering Waterloo Cedar Falls city councils, I was also covering Blackhawk county supervisors, and we're helping with everything because we were down to that many people, and they still are. So, I mean, in this, of course, you're going to see less news, and you're going to see the rise of other platforms, taking over, and you're not really going to see reporters or news organizations able to pivot to these platforms. That's really where we have an opportunity to come in and be a trusted news source that is actually trusted and does have journalistic capabilities.
And sometimes I feel like almost a little bit guilty because part my job is part of that whole shift in the media landscape. Like my job wasn't one of those 12 working in the newsroom back then. It was like people like me were not we didn't have to worry about engagement and likes and clicks and blah, 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 blah. And I have friends whose literally like their entire jobs are mine is quite different than this, and I'm very grateful for that. But some of my friends, like their entire jobs, like the stories that they write and the things that they cover are solely geared towards getting those numbers, those engagements, and getting those clicks. And that's so soul sucking. Like I can't imagine that being the only thing that I do. And not that it makes the work less valuable or less important, but it's just like when that is the focus, it drains some soul from both the worker and the work. And I think one of the things that I've tried to focus on and tried to do with my job is not fall into that, oh, I only care about like getting the growth, getting the numbers, getting more followers. I've tried to focus on like honoring an existing audience and really paying attention to like not only looking at the numbers, but like interpreting the numbers and understanding what they mean and understanding what like people are trying to tell us through what they engage with that we are creating and posting. And I think it's a hard balance to strike, but I think it's one that I am doing my absolute best to like step up and try to make that important.
You're killing it. You're killing it.
I love what you were saying about that, because if you're thinking about clicks, if you're thinking about likes, if you're thinking about retweets,
People can
shares
smell
as
that.
if you're thinking about that as like a value as a currency, right? You win some days, but you're going to lose more days than not,
Yeah.
right? But if you think about it as like artifacts of a person, right? If you think about that as like a evidence of a audience, evidence of interest, the kind of like, if you think about this as being like a data point that helps you better understand kind of like what that, oh well, like someone was really interested. This was something that someone spent 2 minutes with. This was something someone spent 5 minutes with. That I think there's a lot of value that can teach you about the work and like what is working and what's not. I tend to be, I'm one of these, in the same way that like I tend to be I tend to defend objectivity to some extent as a virtue. I also tend to, I grew up in kind of a newsrooms that valued traffic. And I think there's bad ways to approach traffic and there's good ways to approach traffic. We want people to read the work we do.
Absolutely.
One of the joy, I think one of the cool things for me at Starting Line is my audience has really taken off like in a big way. I am reaching many more people than I did at previous jobs. And I think it's, I think it's in big part due to people like Avery and the work you do. But I think it's also the decision from the like junction from the get-go, right? To create work that is in a format that people consume work, right? That it's a familiar format. It's a format that people are interested in. And I've been really excited to be working in the space.
There's definitely things to watch out for, I think, to bring these together. I remember we used to chase like those little dance video things or the little memes that would come and be like, okay, we're gonna have all our reporters get together and we're gonna do this little dance because these are taking off and that'll get us likes. And it's stuff like that is just like so it's just so cringe.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
so
And
cool.
yeah. And like kind of like Zach said, like it's important to care about things like traffic and numbers because you want people to read your stuff. But I think like combining what, people like me and people in my job do with like you guys and your kind of experience in the, I don't want to say the old ways of journalism and make you sound like, geezers, but and you guys have existed in like, it's changed so much over the last like short amount of time that
20
you,
years.
The last
you guys,
84
the last 80,
years.
40 years changed so much in such a short amount of time that you guys
Yeah.
have that perspective of like, it used to be so different and so much more like grounded in values and in ethics and in this like kind of collective work. But now that it's so different now and we have to use completely different tools to share the information, I find a lot of solace in like knowing that what you guys know, what you guys are grounded in, is kind of seeping through in the interpretation of data and the newness and the fastness of the digital age. I find a lot of value in like knowing that you guys to look to like, okay, this is what journalism actually is.
We're Avery's elders.
And I find I find a lot of value in Avery pulling me out of my casket and putting my dead, decrepit body.
I told you
on
half
the
my job
internet.
is making you feel old.
It's working, and a pay raise is coming. I can tell. I can.
You want me to
feel it.
remind you how old I was during 9/11?
No, no thanks. No, it's for the audience. Avery, how old were you during 9/11?
I was 7 months old.
Oh my God. In the same way that Avery has to explain to us, the audience, how young they are, I often have to explain. So being not from here, there are a lot of things that I got to explain to folks back home. But my favorite recently has been, you guys, of course, are familiar with the pork tenderloin.
Yeah, obviously.
One of my favorite packages on the pork tenderloin recently was it's called Tender is the Loin. It was like a excellent titled package by Little Village, the All Weekly in Iowa City. And the thing that I love about the tenderloin is it has very little to do with like kind of what it tastes like or like kind of what the process used to make it. Even its texture is like relatively unimportant. The seminal important detail for the like pork loin aficionado is how large the pork loin is compared
Yes.
to the
bun.
impudent cuck bun on the corner of the tenderloin. And I think that's insane. I think there's like a clear sign that Iowans are on one. It is the pork tenderloin, a loin to bun ratio. It drives me crazy. Is there some stuff about Iowa that you
I
spend a lot of
want
time
I
talking
want
to folks about?
Impossible Meat to make a pork tenderloin that I can hammer out like that, and because
Whoa.
yes, because I miss the pork tenderloin. Yeah, the giant, thin as fuck,
Huge, and it's this thin,
some
and the
mustard
bun.
and some pickles and some onion. And you just, how do you even? Yes.
The,
all
Tender's
this.
loin.
the physics of pork tenderloin.
Can we keep talking about food, because maid-rites I always have to explain to people outside of the state.
God bless
Maid-rites are-
maid-rite.
Maid-rites feel ceremonial in a way that I'm not always ready for, right? Though, like every time I've been to, I forget where the one I went to, but it's the kind of like center meat stack, and the like. It's very like tribal. It feels very like ancient, the way like you reach into the cauldron in the middle of the room and you pull out sustenance that you then will use to like go fight off the cold. Do you know what I'm saying? Like feels very primordial.
It feels very
archetypal.
religious to me. A maid-rite feels very religious. Like there's a maid-rite in the Merle Mall, and I think about it when I like pray during the day, and I face it like it's Mecca. Like I try to face toward the Merle Mall maid-rite because I love them so much.
And it's so important to be pointed in the right direction.
I feel like loose, like just in general, like loose meat sandwich, like turkey. Y'all know what do y'all know about turkey and dressing sandwiches? Like just like an
Quoi? What is
Turkey and
that?
dressing sandwiches.
Okay, so this is like I feel turkey.
First of all, where'd you grow up?
Me or
Yeah.
Zach? I grew up in Independence, Iowa. But my family, my whole family I grew up in just kind of like the northeastern part of the state, mostly because my whole family is from like the Dubuque area, and we would kind of bounce back and forth.
So I should be familiar with this, but
you should be familiar with this.
Turkey
and dressing sandwiches are like it's like you use turkey, and then you make just like dressing out of like gravy or whatever.
Oh.
And then you put it together, and then you just put it on a bun.
You can't name.
So it's not an open face sandwich. They actually
no,
put a top
they
on
close.
it. Okay.
They close, and it's like you can make it like we made it all. It's really easy to make in bulk. We made it at like all of our graduation parties, and you do it with like your Thanksgiving leftovers. You combine like the turkey dressing and the turkey, and you mix it up, and then you make it a little. It looks like throw up.
Yeah,
but it tastes amazing, and it is the best sustenance I have ever had. Like if you're at a graduation party,
Avery, I'm gonna cut you off right now. You cannot gussy up leftovers and call it a like Iowa food.
Literally, shut the hell up. You're so wrong.
This is a crazy take. You're just talking about leftovers.
Yes,
you're putting leftovers on bread.
Yes.
Everyone does this, Avery.
It's so
I haven't heard of this.
But turkey and dressing specifically. It's not just in general. It's turkey and dressing. You take
and some cranberry sauce on the top of it, a little bit of tang.
But it also doesn't need to be Thanksgiving leftovers. You can also just make turkey and dressing sandwiches. You can just set out with the intent to make turkey and dressing sandwiches.
You're gonna make dressing and turkey for another occasion?
Yes, we did it all the time. We did it all the time for graduation party. It's so easy to make in bulk. Is
it just gravy?
It's like, that's such a good question. I honestly don't really know what goes into it. They put it in front of me and I eat it.
Okay.
But it's amazing. My family makes them all the time.
It's revelatory. The idea of doing turkey and dressing for another of our graduation.
It's so good. It's like a cornerstone of like outdoor function culture.
Fascinating.
Alongside yard games, lawn chairs, and bush light.
It's a culture thing.
Yeah.
One of my favorite pieces of like kind of local Iowa journalism that I've seen in the last couple of years was I think about it a lot. It's Courtney Crowder. She's the Iowa columnist for the Des Moines Register. Does a lot of like kind of glitzy big stories, and like I'm gonna be honest with you, some of them I feel like can be a little overwrought. But like say what you will, if there's something true, the woman can write, and she wrote for What Is for My
Inspire
Money.
the tears for real.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
there are some of the stories that I'll read anything she writes because of it. But like, there was one where it was when we were still trying to like get out vaccines, right? This was kind of midway through 2020 in the pandemic. And I remember, there were death counts were rising and rising and rising. And she had found a church in Iowa that was ringing a bell for every death, right?
Wow.
And she just did this thing in the column with like sound and like the way that the like ringing like was kind of like present throughout the story, and it just like it was just a haunting piece, right? And like when I think about the like feelings that I have from that period, right, it's like somehow tied up, verbalized in some like way in that column that someone else wrote. And I when I think about like the power, like work that inspires me, it's I think a lot about like kind of what the power of observation can do. Courtney has like a really miraculous gift for observation, for like kind of like connecting what is seen with what is felt or what is experienced in this way. And I find her really instructive. And as I go about my work, is there a piece from someone else that you really engendered something important in you?
Kind of a plug because these are my friends, but I can't remember exactly what they're like. They're like general assignment reporters at the Des Moines Register, so they do kind of a lot of grunt work. But they're people that I went to school with and I graduated with, and the two whose work I look at the most are Victoria Reyna Rodriguez and Kate Keeley.
Yeah.
And they're just busting their asses for like visibility, for the Des Moines Register visibility. Like they are so talented, art of observation. Like I find them so talented at not only what is going to get that visibility for the Des Moines Register, paying attention to what other people are paying attention to, and then also writing about it in a way that is still very engaging. And they're so like young that it's just like they're people that I went to school with, like these are my peers, and I find them so impressive. But
Yeah,
also,
like you say, they're babies, just like you.
we're so young.
They're so young.
We're so young. We're so young and little. We were months old when 9/11 happened. But another reporter who I have learned a lot from is Starting Line's former reporter Nicole Hittrick. I
Yeah.
think
Yes.
Nicole taught me a master class in perspective and consistency and reliability and rhythm, and nobody can hit a drum beat like Nicole
Oh,
can.
man.
Like I think Nicole is one of the most solid, consistent reporters, and I have so much respect for that.
Yeah. Shout out.
Shout out Nicole.
Oh, that makes me wanna shout out Ty too, because, like, the
Yeah.
way that he would, like, write something, it was so hilarious. Like, you remember he would do, like, these little subheads where he'd pretend people were asking him questions and, like
Yep. Oh, I
and I
love
was just
that.
like, "Oh, we can write like that here."
Right.
We can write like, the Wonket. We can write like, those little alternative magazines and stuff like that. Like we can branch out and sort of reach more people like that. And so he was not scared to do it.
Hmm.
And it didn't matter that he worked at a paper in Iowa, like he was gonna do
Fearless.
it.
He is
Yeah.
fearless. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. The other one I was gonna
Emmy nominated
That's right.
Hey,
That's
documentary
right.
filmmaker Ty
Hey.
Rushing.
Hey, yo.
And obviously, like, he can delve into a story like nobody's business too,
Mhm.
but it was that hilariousness that always
Mhm.
really got to me. The other one is, and I'm not one for, like, war stories, but one of my former editors, Pat Kinney, at the Courier, who is now at the Grout, telling folks war stories. Um, I would be fascinated by every single thing that he wrote. I mean, he would go sit down with this guy like in his 80s, and they would start chatting about some battle in World War II, and you would just feel like you were there, like the level of detail that he could get out of these folks. You could just tell that he was sitting there and just letting them talk for a long time. And that sort of taught me to just let people go, and the way that I was sort of like rolling in and quickly like, all right, I got a half an hour and then I got to go do this. And then I have to like let myself have that time, because like people are going to tell you and then they're going to sit with it. And then they're going to tell you something else. And that something else, when I ask people if there's anything else they want to tell me, or when I just sit with them for a little bit and let them start talking, that's the magic. That's when you get those details that really make a story shine or a video shine. And so I really appreciated the stories that he was doing as well.
Awesome.
You're gonna get us canceled.
When I was a cub reporter, I was like a news intern at the Jackson Free Press. I had a really excellent editor named R.L. Nave, a guy that I still fuck with in a big way. And he, one of the things that he really challenged me to do was like to go back to like chase rabbits, right? It's one of the, when you're a young reporter, I think like the only way to really kind of learn the trade is to just go chase stories, right? It's, I think general assignment reporting is like really good for that, right? Because every day, you know, you got to be an expert by noon. You got to kind of run after it and try to get as much out of it as possible. And I think there's a real art to it. I think there's a real joy, an associative kind of joy to it that I find really important. In the number of times that he sent me back into the field to figure out, to like go make that extra call, to like, okay, so like what kind of shoes were they wearing, right? Or like, you know, what you said they were under a tree. What kind of tree was it? You say it was, you know, little shit like that. But when we talk about like what is the like vascularity of storytelling, what is the thing? What is it that we're doing here, right? It's ultimately like trying to build detail. It's like it's stringing together images on a string that is your story and presenting it to someone as a way to try to resonate on some level with them. And it's just a really powerful process to get to be a part of, and one that I still find a lot of love for.
Especially in print, you know, you have to weave those details in to give people that visual that you're not otherwise able to provide them.
It's funny, when I came to coming from print into radio, I had a lot of folks who would be like, is it great not being constrained to column inches? I was like, nah, like radio's way tighter. Like social media is way tighter. When I was writing for the Press Citizen, I was publishing like 2,000 word stories that should have been like 200 word stories all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like feature obits that would like be 2-parters in like investigations that were just me like going through the agenda of some meeting, right? It was like Zach, like, what? We didn't have to fill the paper.
But that's what it was. When they had paper to fill, you had to go, you know, 20 inches, 25 inches on a story, and you just gonna write till you hit it.
And now you got pixels to fit in.
Right.
I mean, we do have the infinite internet, but thank God someone like people like Instagram restrict how many hours I can talk into my camera.
They should restrict them further.
That was another episode of Cornhole Champions. If you like the show, please rate it and subscribe and share it with your friends. While you're at it, sign up for my newsletter at cornholechampions.substack.com and get these episodes straight to your inbox when they drop Wednesday mornings. Cornhole Champions is a weekly podcast powered by Iowa Starting Line. The podcast is produced by me with music from Avery Mossman. Cornhole Champions is a proud member of the Iowa Writers Collaborative. We'll see you with a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, I'm Zachary Oren Smith.
I'm Amie Rivers.
And I'm Avery Sticker.
Thanks for listening. Why is Steve such a funny name?
Probably because it's a boomer name.
Like Steve, there's Minecraft Steve's pretty funny. There's Le Poisson Steve, which has been taking over my specific social media algorithm. Why is Steve so funny?
Boomer name.
It's a boomer name.
Yeah, that's my theory. Because like Avery's cat's named Frank. That's hilarious.
That's hilarious.
Boomer name / maybe like silent generation name. I mean, you could go even further back with Frank for sure.
Yeah, you could name like a baby Steve. Right?
You could.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't name. Maybe Steven, but you couldn't.
Yeah, Steven for sure. Yeah.
But even Steven is like it'd be like naming dog Gary, right? It wouldn't.
Gary's another one of those.
That's not the name. That's not the name of a dog.
Or Jack.
You can name a dog Jack.
You can name a dog anything, honestly.
No, but you can't. No, but you can't.
What's the name that you could not give your dog?
You could not name your dog Reginald P. Worth. No, you definitely could. God, like a dachshund named Reginald P. Worth. God, yeah, with like a little monocle and a top hat. That'd be
Definitely.
really solid.
Definitely a monocle.
No, but you could name a dog Bartholomew.
Yep. That's a good one. That's hard to call at the dog park, though.
Winston is a dog's name.
Yeah.
In fact, it's weird that Churchill had a dog's name.
And if it's not a dog name, it's a cat name.
Which one?
Any of them. I mean, like, you can name a cat multiple other things because you barely call cats at all.
You couldn't name a cat Steve.
You could absolutely name a cat Steve.
What are you saying? That's such a like radical statement of fact.
If you have a cat named Steve, please write in.
If you have a cat named Steve, go to jail.
I will take all of the cats named Steve in my inbox.
Steve. Wow.
At iowastartingline.com.